Today I want to talk to you a little bit about what happens when you plant monocultures and then the weather doesn't go like you hoped it would go. Monocultures are just any plant planted solely by themselves, just a single species planting. And what happens whenever we plant monocultures and the weather doesn't go well for us, it's like this fescue field we're standing in. We had a slow start to spring. It got warm, then it got cool, then it got warm, and we got several frosts in there. And fescue just started to grow and stopped and started to grow and stopped. And then eventually the day length gets long enough, it says, well, it's time to make seed. So we didn't get a whole lot of leaf production out of it, forage production. Now we got a pretty good seed head crop here, but we didn't get a lot of forage production. And another thing that was poor for fescue this year's fertilizer got really high. We don't fertilize any here at our place, and a lot of our neighbors chose not to fertilize this year because the cost of fertilizer was so high. And then another problem that we run into later, when we wanted, if you was baling hay like a lot of people do, they couldn't get their hay baled in time. It kept raining on and off, and they just never did get their hay baled. We're up at June 9th here today, and some people have got some hay put up a little bit between showers, and a lot of them haven't. It's just kind of been a poor year for fescue forage production. We got seed heads this tall, but the blades of your grass aren't 6 to 8 inches tall. Just not a lot of forage production on it. We'll go show you a way to diversify so that something always does better. We've moved down from the fescue field we was in, the monoculture fescue field, to one of our diverse natives for grazing planting. And as you can tell, we've got quite a bit of growth here. So just wanting to show you there's some fescue in this diverse native here that we didn't get killed out when we planted it, and then it come back, and now it's just part of the planting. But this is it here. You can see this fescue seed head is really tall, but around it we got blades of grass and forbs that aren't even going reproductive yet, haven't even bloomed or bolted. It's really high quality forage that's as taller than those seed heads on the fescue. And your forage of the fescue is down here 6 to 8 inches off the ground. It just, even as part of this, it just hasn't really thrived. So we expect about 2 times the yield out of this is what we do the fescue field. Neither one was fertilized, but we'll expect to, and it might even be more this year, maybe 3 times what our fescue does. Obviously it's going to be quite a bit more here by June, where it's looking a lot better here than up there. You can see here we had the same weather, but we've got a nice mix of cool season, warm season grasses. And when you plant diversity, what's bad for one is good for another. So you always have plants that do well. This year, our cool seasons were a little bit late. They didn't grow quite as much, just like the fescue with the weather. But you can tell our warm seasons are really taking advantage of that extra moisture, and the cool seasons being a little smaller. So we've got plenty of forage here, and it kind of makes a chain of forages. When your cool seasons are done, you're going to your warm seasons. And then when your warm seasons are done, you're going back to your cool seasons. The weather changes, drought happens, but multiple forages will be a stronger forage base than what just a single forage will. Now sure, you hit every now and then with your single forages, the weather lines up and you have peak production. But more often than not, the weather doesn't line up perfect, or your grazing didn't line up perfect, especially when you get into the annual production. You got to get them planted, and that doesn't always go perfect. So where fescue is the predominant forage, or fescue clover pasture for this area, for this part of Missouri, they call it the Fescue Belt for a reason. And what happens is all your neighbors are experiencing the same year. They have the same fertilizer problem, they have the same rain problem, they have the same cool spring problem. Whatever the problem is, it's all the same, and that tends to compound. Your neighbor's not going to have a lot of hay for sale either. You're short on grass, they're short on grass, and it tends to compound over the whole region because we're all doing the same thing. So a diverse native for grazing really spreads that risk out by having that chain of forages, and things just keep coming off one after another. This was Colt Hamilton with Hamilton Native Outpost. Any questions, comments, please contact us.